Should mayors, councillors and senior managers in municipalities be held personally liable for financial losses, bankruptcy and corruption? Professor William Gumede believes so. Joins us now to talk about this and more. Prof, good evening and thank you very much for your time tonight.
Good evening for having me. Good evening to your viewers.
Why have we failed to hold councillors, mayors and senior managers in municipalities accountable for the huge losses that are reported yearly by the Auditor General? I mean, just now she told us 5.5 billion of funds went missing and nobody knows where it is. There's just no answer.
Absolutely. I mean, because we are not holding them accountable. I mean, it's as simple as that. They oversee our, or they oversee our money, but we don't hold them accountable for wasting their money or for lack of public service and so on. And I think perhaps we've tried everything, because the ANC or even other political parties often also do not hold their own councillors accountable either. So, I mean, ordinary citizens is almost nowhere to go except to go to court. So I think one way to hold them accountable is to hold them personally liable for any losses and any service delivery failure. And I think once it's possibly, if it bites in their pockets, if they feel it in their pockets, I think people will become much more accountable.
Yeah. Have these interventions been applied anywhere in municipalities consistently, and what have the results been?
No, no one has been held personally liable, for wasting taxpayers' money or for corruption or for incompetence. Because, politically, if one could imagine, the political parties will be very reluctant to introduce a kind of system. Because, they themselves may be the people who would vote for that. They themselves may also then end up paying out of their own pockets when they mismanage or when they are corrupt.
Yeah. Up until this point, are you saying that there's just been no interest in financial recovery of the stolen money, or are other plans in place and other provisions in our constitution that would allow for that money to be recovered?
So the Constitution really makes provision on 3 occasions for municipalities to be rescued, almost like bailout. If it was a normal business, it would be bailout. But let's call it, the Constitution doesn't say that, but, it comes close to it. So, on one occasion, if a municipality have a crisis of service delivery, they cannot deliver, they don't have the capacity, there's a crisis. The second level is when a municipality can't put the money together to put a budget together. And that was happening at Swani Metro in 2020. And then, the last occasion is when there is just no money at all. And that is, the Amatoli municipality, Eastern Cape and Mangaung in the Free State. So on those 3 occasions. And then the Constitution then says, well, if that happens, then what needs to be done, outside administrators have to be appointed now to oversee that municipality to try to bring it back to recovery. And then what must also happen, not only, the outside administrators, but now there has to be a plan. If it was a service delivery failure, then the administrator must help to put together a service delivery plan. And if it is a financial issue, they must put together a finance plan, how they're going to do that. Now, it stops there. Now, our problem is often what happens with all of the councils and administration. I mean, there's just about a dozen of those municipalities in one or other administration, for example, in KwaZulu-Natal. Now, what happens then is that, yes, the council is administrator is appointed. Now, often that's really where things go wrong. Now, often the administrator that's appointed is not a specialist, a turnaround person. It's often a political individual linked to, for example, the governing party in that municipality, in that failed municipality. The second thing what normally does is, the councillors are not fired. They are still there while the administrator now try, to recover the finances, or to try now to have a turnaround strategy. For example, in Mangaung or in the Amatoli municipality, I mean, the councillors were still sitting tight. They were getting their salaries. And then in the third instance of a weakness is as the municipal managers, now, one can call them almost the CEOs of a city or municipality. And they're supposed to now, in their job, they get paid a lot of money to make certain that we don't have these sort of financial problems or service delivery problems. They also sit there, they get their salaries while the administrator now try to make a turnaround. Now, there's really then a weakness both in the constitution and legislation. Now, if we had said, it's all good and well, let's continue with that kind of system, but let's firstly fire the councillors who oversaw, a failing municipality or metro, and also fire the municipal manager if he or she did not deliver. And then thirdly, if we say, well, let's just recover the money from them personally. Now, I think once we do these three things, I think we'll see a turnaround in policies.
Now, you mentioned the question of Tshwane. I mean, what do you do in Tshwane, for example, where the current mayor of the DA that's there has now come in and said, well, the administrator actually came in and made things worse. I mean, the situation of administrators themselves come in and they fall within, even those who are being put under administration, look at them as maybe some sort of political purging. It just becomes a political intervention more than the actual intervention that is required in the municipality to turn it around.
I mean, in a research paper that I've done, which is coming out a little later in October, so what happens often, which I've observed, is that in many cases the administrators are politically appointees. So just think about it. I mean, here you have a municipality, and I'll give you an example. Let's just say, let's go to Mangaung, or we can even Amatoli, or any of the municipalities in KZN, this under administration. So, you appoint a political figure. Now, that's really where you go wrong. Because what you need there, you need an expert turnaround specialist, not a political figure. And then normally what then happens is now this political figure are normally most probably the same person from the governing party of that municipality. And that person, instead now of holding now the councillors accountable, he or she then try to preserve the jobs of the councillors and, the municipal manager, because they're all part from the same party. So now, then it is almost useless then to appoint an administrator, then almost it becomes like wasteful expenditure, because the administrator is not there to really do his or her job of turning around a municipality. Is almost, of actually preparing the municipality for a bailout, and secondly, protecting the jobs of the errant municipal councillors and the city or municipal manager.
Now, is this a situation that we're going to have to live with? I mean, even if one would come in and say they would want to attempt a financial recovery plan or some kind of trimming down of bloated staff, then they still have unions, for example, to contend with in that particular space. Will we be in a space where we are able to turn our municipalities around?
Well, we don't have a choice. We have to do it because, most of the municipalities are actually failed state. Many people ask me, well, is South Africa a failed state? And I respond, they're part of South Africa, certainly is a failed state, part of government. And at municipal level, we could actually say almost, 2/3 of our municipalities are failed states. If they would have been countries on their own, they would have been declared failed states because they fail at every level. Now, I think one way, of course, a much more long-term view to change our municipalities would be the local government elections. So, people must stop voting for people who did not live in the past. And people must also stop voting, on parties based on emotional issues, on color issues, on, or like they mustn't vote like as if parties are Amazulu or Kaiser Chiefs. You support them through thick and thin. Now, if you're going to support a party like it's a soccer club, I mean, you're going to feel it in lack of service delivery. Your children's going to feel it in terms of poor education outcomes, and you're going to feel it if you get sick in terms of health, because the public service is not going to work. So really, people must become a little bit more discerning and stop voting for people that don't deliver. But if we can bring in another principle, if we could say, well, if a municipality, for example, failed and had to be bailed out or put under administration, if we say, let's ban the councillors who were part and parcel of such a municipality, never to be able to stand for elections. Or we could just say, I mean, we may not ban them for a lifetime. We could say you are banned for 10, 20 years. You can never stand for public office anymore. That, I think, will also be a disincentive. It would mean they cannot stand again for elections again. So hopefully they're out of the system.
Does this call maybe for, I know the Auditor General has been given teeth, but even those teeth are such that she would still need to go to that municipality, give them an opportunity to rectify the situation, give them another opportunity to rectify the situation, and again then say, I'll give you a note if you still don't rectify the situation. It's still a long process. It's not as if tomorrow she can just go in and say, here's a note, you're being held personally liable.
Yeah, no, unfortunately, it's as difficult as that. Yeah, I mean, the system, there's so many loopholes, unfortunately, in the system. So if you're a corrupt or incompetent councillor, you could delay the process for a very long time. But I mean, if we are consistent, even if people, corrupt and incompetent people delay, if we eventually get them, it may be 2 or 3 years, but we eventually get them. I think we will be able to, to bring a turnaround. But I mean, for me, the key thing is accountability and making people personally liable for messing up and for being corrupt. And I think even, bringing that principle will, even if we don't apply it immediately, I think we may then begin to start seeing changing of outcomes for the better.
Prof, appreciate your time and thank you very much for joining us tonight. That's Wits University Associate Professor at the School of Governance, Professor William Gumede.